in the heart of Weston West Virginia, stands a monumental testament to human suffering and historical darkness, known as the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This massive Gothic stone structure looms over the landscape like a dormant beast that has swallowed thousands of souls over its long and tortured existence. The very air around the perimeter feels heavy, with the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shattered windows that line the imposing facade. Visitors who approach the grounds often report an immediate sensation of unease that settles deep in their bones and refuses to leave. The sandstone walls seem to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it, creating a perpetual gloom that hangs over the property, even on the brightest of summer days. The history of this location is not merely a record of bricks and mortar, but a chronicle of pain and despair that stretches back to the middle of the 19th century. It was an era when the understanding of mental health was in its infancy, and the solutions for treating the afflicted were often as brutal as the maladies themselves. The asylum was constructed during a time of national turmoil, when the United States was tearing itself apart, and the echoes of that conflict seem to resonate within the corridors to this day. Those who walk the halls report hearing the phantom sounds of boots marching in unison, and the distant cries of men who died long ago. It is a place where the barrier between the past and the present is terrifyingly thin. Fog often rolls off the West Fork River and wraps the asylum in a thick white blanket that obscures the boundaries of the complex. Under the cover of this mist, the building takes on a life of its own breathing, with the drafts that whistle through the cracks in the masonry. Local residents whisper stories of lights flickering in wings of the building that have had no electricity for decades. They speak of shadowy figures standing on the roof, looking down with an intensity that freezes the blood of anyone brave enough to look back. This is not simply a haunted house, but a vast repository of tragic energy, where the emotions of the condemned have stained the very fabric of reality. The architect behind this imposing structure was a man named Richard Snowden Andrews, who designed the building in the Gothic revival style to follow the Kirkbride Plan. Thomas Story Kirkbride was a physician who believed that the environment played a crucial role in curing the mentally ill. His vision was one of long, sprawling wings that allowed for maximum sunlight and fresh air, which were thought to be restorative to the troubled mind. However, the noble intentions of Thomas Story Kirkbride were destined to be corrupted by the harsh realities of overcrowding and systemic neglect. What was designed as a sanctuary of healing slowly transformed into a warehouse for the unwanted and the forgotten people of society. Construction began in late 1858 and was a massive undertaking that utilized the labor of prison convicts to quarry the sandstone from the local hills. The sheer scale of the project was unprecedented for the region, and the building remains one of the largest hand-cut stone masonry buildings in the entire world. But the work was interrupted by the outbreak of the American Civil War, which brought violence and chaos to the very doorstep of the asylum. The grounds became a military post for the Union Army, and the half-finished halls echoed with the commands of officers rather than the quiet footsteps of nurses. This martial beginning planted a seed of aggression in the soil that would bear dark fruit for generations. In June of 1861, the 7th Ohio Infantry Regiment seized the gold that had been deposited in the local bank for the construction of the asylum. This event, known as the Great Gold Robbery of Weston, stripped the project of its funding and delayed its completion, while adding a layer of criminal intrigue to its history. The soldiers who occupied the grounds were not there to care for the sick, but to secure territory, and their presence introduced a rough and violent energy to the site. Many believe that the spirits of soldiers from this era still patrol the grounds, unable to relinquish their post, or perhaps searching for the stolen gold that was taken under the cover of darkness. When the asylum finally opened its doors to patients in 1864, it was already struggling to meet the demands placed upon it. The facility was designed to house 250 patients in relative comfort, but the population swelled rapidly as families and courts sent their troubled members to Weston. By the mid-20th century, the asylum held over 2,400 patients, packed into conditions that were nothing short of inhumane. Beds lined the hallways, and patients were forced to sleep on the cold floor or in shifts as the infrastructure crumbled under the weight of the overcrowding. The sanctuary had become a prison where dignity was stripped away upon entry. The types of individuals admitted to the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum ranged from the violently psychotic to those who were merely socially inconvenient. Records show that people were committed for reasons as trivial as laziness or indigestion or religious enthusiasm, and even novel reading. Women were particularly vulnerable to being locked away for exhibiting independence or emotional outbursts that men of the time deemed inappropriate. Once inside the thick stone walls, these individuals were subjected to the same harsh regimen as the criminally insane. Their identities were erased and replaced with patient numbers, and their pleas for release fell on deaf ears as they became permanent residents of the hill. As the population grew, so did the violence within the wards, which became a daily reality for both the staff and the patients, with a ratio of staff to patients that was dangerously low. There was little control over the chaotic environment. Fights would break out over food or space, and often resulted in severe injuries or death before any order could be restored. The walls of the isolation cells bear the scratches and gouges of desperate hands trying to claw their way to freedom. It is said that the residual energy of this constant fear and aggression has permeated the limestone, acting as a battery that powers the paranormal activity witnessed today. Medical treatments at the asylum during the 19th and early 20th centuries were often experimental and deeply traumatic for the patients. Doctors believed that shocking the system could reset the mind, leading to the use of ice water baths, where patients were submerged until they lost consciousness. Others were subjected to insulin shock therapy, which induced comas that lasted for hours and often caused permanent brain damage. These procedures were performed in the name of science, but to the patients, they were nothing more than torture sessions. The screams of those undergoing these treatments filled the corridors and created a soundscape of misery that many claim can still be heard in the dead of night. One of the most notorious figures associated with the dark medical history of the asylum is Dr. Walter Freeman, the father of the transorbital lobotomy. This gruesome procedure involved inserting a metal pick-like instrument through the eye socket to sever connections in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Dr. Walter Freeman traveled to Weston to perform these operations on dozens of patients, often without the use of anesthesia or proper sterilization. The ice pick lobotomy left many patients in a vegetative state, stripping them of their personality and leaving them as empty shells. The legacy of Dr. Walter Freeman haunts the medical wing, where the clinking of metal tools is frequently reported by paranormal investigators. The environment within the asylum created a hierarchy of survival, where the strong preyed upon the weak and the staff turned a blind eye. There are documented cases of patients murdering other patients and suicides were a tragic and common occurrence. In one particularly gruesome incident, a patient was beaten to death by two others using the metal frame of a bed. The savagery of such attacks left a psychic imprint on the location that sensitive individuals describe as a crushing weight on their chest. It is a place where the concept of safety was completely alien, and every shadow held the potential for violence. Among the many spirits said to inhabit the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, the most famous is perhaps that of a little girl named Lily. Lily was born within the walls of the asylum to a mother who was a patient, and she spent her short life surrounded by madness. She died of pneumonia at the tender age of 9, but her spirit seems to have refused to leave the only home she ever knew. Visitors often bring toys and candy to her room, where they report seeing balls roll across the floor on their own. The sound of a child giggling or singing nursery rhymes often echoes through the empty women's ward, chilling the blood of those who hear it. Another formidable presence is that of a darker entity, often referred to as the creeper or the crawler, who moves along the floor in the shadows. This entity is described as a mass of blacker than black darkness that slithers with a predatory intelligence. Witnesses claim to feel an intense wave of hostility when this shadow is near, and some have even reported being physically touched or scratched. The creeper is believed to be the manifestation of the accumulated suffering and evil that occurred within the asylum over the decades. It does not seem to be the spirit of a human, but rather something elemental and malevolent that feeds on fear. The fourth floor of the main building holds a reputation for being one of the most active and dangerous areas of the entire complex. This area was often used to house the most violent and unpredictable patients, and it was the site of a chaotic fire in 1935. The charred remains of the wood and the smoke-stained walls serve as a visual reminder of the disaster. People venturing onto the fourth floor frequently report hearing heavy footsteps pacing behind them and the slamming of heavy doors that have been removed from their hinges years ago. It is a place where the air feels electric with pent-up rage. One particularly tragic story involves a patient named Dean, who was known for his gentle demeanor despite his large physical stature. Dean worked in the kitchen and was beloved by some of the staff, but he met a brutal end at the hands of two other patients. They attacked him in a secluded room, and he was unable to defend himself against their combined fury. His spirit is said to linger in the room where he died, and visitors often report feeling a profound sense of sadness and confusion in that space. Paranormal investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena that they believe is Dean asking why he was hurt. The Civil War wing of the asylum is another hotbed of paranormal activity, where the spirits of soldiers seem to be trapped in an eternal patrol. During the war, the unfinished asylum served as a camp for the Union troops, and the grounds saw skirmishes and theft. Visitors have reported seeing full-body apparitions of men in blue uniforms walking through walls or standing guard at the entrances. The smell of gunpowder and stale tobacco smoke often manifests out of nowhere, transporting witnesses back to the 1860. These soldier spirits appear to be unaware that the war ended over a century and a half ago. In the geriatrics ward, the atmosphere changes from one of violence to one of profound loneliness and physical decay. This area housed the elderly patients who were often suffering from dementia and had been abandoned by their families. The energy here is heavy, with the feeling of waiting for visitors who never come. Wheelchairs have been seen moving on their own, and the phantom scent of urine and antiseptic is a common olfactory hallucination. It is a heartbreaking reminder of the final years of those who died alone. and unloved within the cold stone walls. The isolation cells, colloquially known as the cages, are small, cramped spaces where unruly patients were locked away for days or weeks at a time. These cells had no furniture and often no light, forcing the occupant to exist in total sensory deprivation. The psychological toll of this confinement was immense, and many patients descended further into madness during their time in the cage. Those who step inside these cells today often report feeling an intense pressure in their head and a desperate urge to flee. Scratch marks on the back of the heavy doors stand as a testament to the frantic attempts of patients to escape their stone coffins. There is a specific hallway in the medical center where the apparitions of nurses are frequently sighted by tour guides and guests. These spectral figures appear in the starched white uniforms of the mid-20th century and seem to be going about their rounds. Unlike the darker entities, these spirits do not seem malevolent, but rather stuck in a loop of their daily duties. Some witnesses have reported feeling a cold hand on their forehead, as if a nurse were checking for a fever. It is a bizarre juxtaposition of care and creepiness that leaves a lasting impression on anyone who experiences it. The sheer size of the Kirkbride building creates a labyrinthine environment where it is easy to become disoriented and separated from a group. Corridors stretch for hundreds of feet and look identical to one another, creating a dizzying effect on the mind. In this confusion, the sound of distant footsteps or a door slamming can cause panic to set in rapidly. It is in these moments of vulnerability that the spirits seem to draw closer, feeding off the anxiety of the living. The architecture itself feels designed to entrap and confuse, reinforcing the feeling of being a prisoner within the asylum. One of the most disturbing locations is the room where the electroshock therapy sessions were conducted on a routine basis. The equipment may be gone, but the energy of the convulsions and the screams seems to have burned into the floorboards. Visitors often report feeling their muscles twitch or experiencing a sudden migraine when entering this room. Some have even collapsed from sudden seizures, despite having no history of epilepsy. It is as if the electricity that once surged through the bodies of the patients is still crackling in the air, waiting to ground itself in a new victim. The cemeteries located on the asylum grounds are the final resting places for thousands of patients who died while in state care. Many of the graves are marked only with simple concrete posts bearing numbers rather than names, effectively erasing the identity of the deceased. This lack of recognition is believed to contribute to the restlessness of the spirits who wander the grounds seeking acknowledgement. In recent years, efforts have been made to identify the bodies and provide proper headstones, but the vast majority remain anonymous. These numbered graves stand as a silent indictment of a system that treated human beings as inventory. During the night tour, which are popular among thrill seekers, the asylum takes on a truly sinister character that is absent during the day. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing dust, motes dancing in the air like microscopic spirits. It is in the silence of the night that the auditory phenomena become most pronounced. The sound of a metal gurney rolling down the hallway is a classic auditory manifestation reported by hundreds of witnesses. The squeaking of the wheels and the clattering of metal on stone is unmistakable, even when the corridors are completely empty. The presence of children's spirits is not limited to Lily, as there were many minors committed to the asylum over the years. Some were orphans with no place to go, while others suffered from developmental disabilities that their families could not manage. In the designated children's ward, the sound of crying is a frequent occurrence, along with the disembodied sound of a ball bouncing. These spirits seem to crave interaction and play, often tugging on the clothing of visitors or untying their shoelaces. It is a sorrowful reminder that the asylum was a warehouse for the unwanted of all ages. The kitchen and dining areas were communal spaces where tensions often flared and violence erupted over meager rations. The phantom smells of cooking food, specifically bacon and coffee, have been reported in these areas long after the stoves went cold. But alongside these mundane scents is the overwhelming feeling of aggression and territoriality. It was here that Dean met his end, and it was here that the hierarchy of the patients was most brutally enforced. The clatter of trays and the murmur of hundreds of voices can sometimes be heard echoing off the tiled walls. Paranormal investigators who have spent the night in the asylum often capture compelling evidence in the form of electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. These recordings often contain voices whispering names or issuing warnings to the living to get out. Some of the voices are guttural and demonic, while others sound confused and pleading. The consistency of these recordings across different investigations suggests that the asylum is a crowded vessel of consciousness. The sheer volume of voices captured indicates that the population of the dead may rival the population of the living at its peak. The distinct architecture of the windows, with their iron bars, serves as a constant reminder of the captivity that defined the lives of the patients. Looking out from the inside, the beautiful West Virginia landscape is fragmented by the metal grid, taunting the patients with a view of freedom they could not reach. Many spirits are seen standing at these windows, gazing out with a longing that is palpable to observers on the ground. It is a poignant image of eternal confinement, where the soul is trapped within the physical boundaries of the asylum, even after death. In 1994, the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was finally closed due to changes in mental health treatment and the deterioration of the building. The closure was abrupt, and much of the equipment and patient records were left behind, as if the staff had simply vanished. This abandonment froze the asylum, in time preserving the atmosphere of the mid-90s. Amidst the decay of the 19th century structure, the sudden emptiness after over a century of overcrowding created a vacuum that the paranormal activity rushed to fill. The silence that followed the closure was deafening. After the closure, the building sat vacant for years, falling into a state of disrepair that added to its menacing appearance. Vandals and urban explorers broke in seeking thrills, but many fled in terror after encountering things they could not explain. Police officers who were called to investigate break-ins often refused to enter the building alone, citing the overwhelming feeling of being watched. The local community regarded the empty asylum with a mixture of fear and respect, knowing that the history contained within was too dark to be ignored. It stood as a rotting monument to a bygone era of medicine. When the property was eventually purchased and reopened for tour, the new owners began the massive task of restoration and preservation. However, the construction work seemed to stir up the activity rather than quiet it. Workers reported their tools going missing, only to reappear in impossible places, or finding their work undone the next morning. It appeared that the spirits of the asylum were territorial and did not appreciate the changes being made to their home. The renovation process became a delicate dance between preserving history and respecting the invisible residents. The legend of the shadowy figure known as Big Jim is another tale that circulates among the staff and frequent visitors to the asylum. Big Jim was a patient known for his immense strength and his role in protecting the nurses from other violent patients. His spirit is said to patrol the hallways, still acting as a guardian against the darker entities that lurk in the shadows. Witnesses describe a massive hulking shadow that blocks the light, but does not emit the same feeling of malice as the creeper. Big Jim serves as a reminder that not all who resided there were evil. There are rooms in the asylum where the temperature drops drastically within seconds, creating cold spots that are visible on thermal cameras. These sudden freezes often accompany the feeling of someone breathing down your neck or standing directly behind you. The laws of thermodynamics seem to be suspended in these specific locations, where the ambient heat is sucked away by an unseen force. Skeptics try to explain this away as drafts, but the focused nature of the cold spots defies natural explanation. It is a physical manifestation of the presence of the dead. The darker side of the asylum history involves the rumors of satanic rituals and occult practices that allegedly took place in the abandoned years. While concrete evidence is scarce graffiti and strange arrangements of objects found by early explorers suggest that the location attracted those seeking to tap into its dark energy. These activities may have opened doors that were better left closed, inviting in entities that were never human to begin with. The mixture of human tragedy and occult tampering has created a cocktail of paranormal activity that is volatile and dangerous. One of the most terrifying encounters reported involves the sensation of invisible hands wrapping around the throat of a visitor. This physical assault is rare, but it has happened enough times to warrant warnings for those with heart conditions or frailty. The choking sensation is often accompanied by a growl or a hiss that seems to originate from right beside the ear. This aggressive behavior suggests that some of the spirits retain the violent tendencies they possessed in life, or perhaps have become something more demonic in death. The peeling paint and crumbling plaster of the asylum walls reveal layers of history like the rings of a tree. Each layer represents a different era of treatment and a different generation of suffering. In some areas, messages scratched into the plaster by patients can still be read pleading for help or declaring their innocence. These tangible remnants of the past serve as a direct link to the individuals who lived and died in these rooms. Reading these desperate scrawls brings the reality of their situation into sharp and painful focus. The Civil War era ghosts are not the only soldiers said to haunt the grounds, as the asylum also treated veterans of the World Wars. These men came to the asylum suffering from what was then called shell shock and is now known as post-traumatic stress disorder. Their spirits are often seen huddled in corners or diving for cover at the sound of a loud noise. The trauma of war combined with the harsh conditions of the asylum created a double burden of suffering that anchored them to the site. Their eternal war continues within the confines of the stone walls. As the sun sets over Weston, the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum casts a long shadow that seems to reach out and touch the town itself. The relationship between the town and the asylum is complex, woven together by generations of employment and fear. Many locals have ancestors who worked there or were patients there, creating a deep personal connection to the place. The stories of the asylum are not just folklore to them, but family history passed down in hushed tones. The building is a scar on the landscape that refuses to fade. Despite the commercialization of the ghost tour and the influx of television crews, the core atmosphere of the asylum remains undeniably grim. The commercial activity has not sanitized the location, but rather exposed more people to its heavy energy. Those who come seeking a cheap scare often leave with a profound sense of sadness and a newfound respect for the reality of mental illness. The ghosts of the asylum serve as messengers from a darker time, reminding us of the fragility of the human mind. The true horror is not the spirits, but the history, the lingering dread that follows a visit to the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is difficult to shake off. It clings to your clothes like the smell of mothballs and stale air. Many visitors report having nightmares for weeks after their tour, dreaming of endless hallways and faceless figures. It is as if the asylum establishes a psychic link with those who enter, tapping into their own fears and anxieties. The souls that are trapped there never truly leave, and in a way, neither does anyone who visits. Ultimately, the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum stands as a monument to the failures of the past and the enduring power of human suffering. It is a place where the walls literally talk if one has the ears to listen, and the stories they tell are of pain and neglect. The spirits that roam the halls are not just monsters in a ghost story, but the remnants of broken lives that were swept under the rug of society. As long as the stone walls stand, the energy of those thousands of souls will continue to resonate, ensuring that they are never truly forgotten. The heavy iron gates may be locked at night, but the activity within continues regardless of whether there are witnesses to see it. The screams still echo in the empty wards, and the shadows still dance in the moonlight that streams through the bars. It is a sovereign state of the dead, where the living are merely tourists passing through a reality they cannot fully understand. The Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum remains a wound in the earth that refuses to heal, a place where the past is always present and the souls never truly leave.